So you go ahead and start it, and then I will share my screen and do one other thing here. All right. Margie, you ready? We could start.
Yes, I'm ready.
Cool. All right. Well, welcome everybody to the District 5960 Global Grants Workshop. We started these last year to really focus on global grants. I think probably all of you participated in one of our grants management seminars over the last week or so. And, and we kind of felt, even if we were all together in the same room, if we tried to cover both district and global grants in a grants management seminar, it'd be too long, too detailed, and especially too cumbersome for those that just want to do district grants, and too long for everybody. So we developed this workshop to help you have a better feel for global grants and what needs to be done throughout the process to make your grant the best it can be, and make it as easy as possible on yourself and everyone else involved. The two of us that'll be speaking the majority of the time tonight, my name is Kyle Haugen. I'm with the Prior Lake Rotary Club and am the District Rotary Foundation team leader. And Margie.
Introduce yourself, Margie.
Margie, don't do this.
All right, we're starting again. I'm Margie Horning. I'm from the Stillwater Sunrise Rotary Club, and I'm the District Grants team leader.
Thanks, Margie. A few housekeeping items before we go too far here. Please, again, make sure to keep yourself muted, just so there's not as much distraction as possible behind you. And Kathy Hewitt is also here with us, kind of managing the call. And I think if she notices people are unmuted, she'll probably mute you as well. But use the chat box for questions along the way if you have any. We'll find the best time to answer those, either in process or wait until the end. Also, if you have any issues from a tech standpoint, message Kathy as well. Poll questions, make sure to answer any. I'll give you a spoiler, there aren't any, so there you go. And at the end, we'll unmute things for some question and answer time there. There's several purposes for this grants, or for the global grant. Oops, hold on, sorry about that. We skipped a slide. There's several purposes for this global grants workshop. Obviously, we want to share the requirements on global grants so you can put together not only an acceptable grant, but the best possible grant with the least amount of effort. And we want to make the process as easy as possible for you. So we'll go through some of the global grant process to broaden your knowledge base. And lastly, as we mentioned in the grants management seminar, the Rotary Foundation requires a club to be qualified to sponsor a grant, and your participation today will help you qualify for that grant. Our agenda, which you kind of saw a second ago, a lot of stuff on there. We're going to try to get through this as quickly as possible to at least give you an overview on everything. I would suggest that you jot down any key notes that you think are important along the way, and we will be sending you a recap of this with some different documents attached, but also a recording of this whole thing, so you can go back if you missed anything. And lastly, certainly if you do have any questions, feel free to reach out to Margie or myself from that perspective. Our first attendance check, just because we want to make sure people are paying attention. If you can, please enter your name and club in the chat box. And while everybody does that, I'm going to keep going. We talked about, at the grants management seminar, we talked about the requirements to be qualified to do a grant through the Rotary Foundation. It's essentially the same, with one difference for global grants, and that's a district requirement. The attending of a grants management seminar is a Rotary Foundation requirement, but we want people to be as knowledgeable as possible about global grants as well. So that's why you're here tonight, along with the grants management seminar that you already attended, because both are required to be qualified for your club. And it's for global grants especially, it has to be one of the three main contacts of the grant has to be attending here tonight or next week when we do this. Club must be in good standing. Again, that means that all of your Rotary International and district dues are up to date, as well as any reporting from other grants you've done in the past. And then the Rotary Foundation Memorandum of Understanding and the district addendum must be signed as well. Before we get into the meat of the discussion from there, I'd like to welcome Ed Merrick, our district governor for next year, to make a couple comments. Ed.
Thanks, Kyle, and greetings, everybody. Thanks for being here this evening. It's clearing up down here. I understand up in Wisconsin, you still have some rain coming. So, and you've already attended the grant management seminar. We learned the basics of applying for a grant and specifically for a district grant. Good on you and your club for stepping up to the global grant. Today, you'll learn how to make a bigger, bolder impact on the world. Global grants require more work to ensure the intent is on one of the 6 areas of focus. Margie Horning and the mentors that comprise the district's grant management team will provide the scrutiny and guidance to secure an approved global grant application. I look forward to following your projects as they spread positive peace across the globe. Thanks again for attending this evening and be proud of the good work you'll be able to accomplish. Kyle?
Thanks, Ed. You know, as Ed just said, and during the grants management seminar, we talked about how all of Rotary's areas of focus lead towards positive peace, which is the fulfillment of all needs in a society. We'll dive into the areas of focus and how they pertain to global grants a little later on, but we wanted to show this video first as a way to focus on the areas of focus. Sorry.
No sound coming through.
Well, if you don't have sound, it's just music anyway. Sorry about that. Ah. Well, at least you got to watch a video. Sorry about the sound part of things there, as I didn't realize that that didn't show or that didn't play for you, but it was just motivational music is all that was. So,
but let me say that with the sound, it really is inspirational. So we'll try to get that organized a little bit later.
Yeah, we'll do something along that lines. Sorry about that. After viewing the video, I think you'll agree that as Rotarians, we have enormous opportunities to make a difference in the lives of people around the globe. Global grants are tools to help us create positive peace. But as you can imagine, the Rotary Foundation provides us with a list of requirements for global grants. These are also identified in the Rotary Foundation's Guide to Global Grants, but we wanted to highlight them now. Margie, go for it. Margie?
Margie is muted.
Yeah, she'll get off mute.
I'll get this organized by the last time. All right, starting again. There's a lot of musts on this particular list, but the Rotary Foundation really looks at each and every one of these and all of your global grants. First of all, you need to have a long-term sustainable impact. Include activities that align with the goals of one of Rotary's areas of focus. Have a minimum budget, and I do mean minimum, of $35,000, which includes a minimum world match fund of $15,000. It has to address an important need, and this is really important, a need that's identified by the community itself. Strengthen the community's capacity to meet its own needs. And you must, those were things for the project. Now you must actively involve the benefiting community in the project. Partner with a club in another country. Qualify your club for global grants every year, which you're doing tonight. Develop a project plan that includes a budget and a financial plan. Measure progress towards the outcome. Stay up to date in reporting for all active grants. And probably the most important of all is for humanitarian projects, you must conduct a community assessment before applying and include the results in your application. Now, because it's critical to global grants, I think we need to discuss planning for sustainability. For Rotary, sustainability means providing long-term solutions to community problems that community members themselves can support after the grant funding ends. We want global grants to make a lasting difference and provide meaningful change in people's lives. One important thing is start early. You can't suddenly add sustainability items at the end of the project. Good grant management engages members, supports meaningful service projects, and has meaningful impact long after the grant is done. Global grants show communities what we can do. Now let's dive a little deeper into how we make a sustainable impact using this graphic from TRF, the Rotary Foundation. The first step is starting with the community. Because local participation is so important to the project's success, Rotary requires local sponsors to conduct a community assessment. Assessing your community's strengths, weaknesses, needs, and assets is an essential first step in planning an effective project. By taking the time to learn about your community, you can discover the best opportunities for service and maximize your club's ability to make an impact. The process of doing the assessment helps you build valuable relationships and encourages community members to participate in making and, more importantly, maintaining those improvements. An assessment not only helps you better understand the dynamics of your community, but it also allows you and your project's beneficiaries to make informed decisions about service opportunities or priorities. Before you start the assessment, consider what specifically you want to learn about your community, the community that you want to be working in. You may find new ways to address an unknown or a known issue and give residents a chance to point out overlooked challenges that we don't see because we're outsiders. While conducting an assessment, be sure to manage expectations. Communities understand the benefits of partnering with Rotary and how that partnership requires their involvement, it requires their contribution, and it requires their ownership. Conduct your community assessment before determining the project goals and scope. The assessment should drive the project. Be open-minded. Choose participants carefully. Include often overlooked marginalized groups in the community. Consider yourself an outsider. And very important, don't promise a project before you make a decision. The Global Grants Community Assessment Results Form would be completed and included in your grant application. There's another document that's available. It's called Community Assessment Tools, and it's a great resource for Rotary projects, and we will be getting you e-copies of those. Now, after you've started with community, the next step is encouraging local ownership. A true sign of a project's success is when community members embrace the project as their own. Empowering community members to access their needs and plans that address them leads to a more effective project and more sustainable outcomes. And that's the name of the game, is sustainability. The process also helps to identify key community members who can help pioneer lasting improvements. Another key to sustainability is to provide training. A project's success depends on people. By providing training, education, and community outreach, you strengthen beneficiaries' ability to meet those project objectives. Collaborate with local organizations to provide this training. Training plans are required, so those plans are required for global grants. When preparing them, use the format that is provided by Rotary. Don't go crazy and think, oh, I know a better way. Rotary wants to see it in their format. Along with providing training, buying local is significant for the ongoing life of a project. Purchase equipment and technology from local sources whenever possible. And make sure if you've got some equipment that spare parts are available locally. Build capacities so that community members can operate, maintain, and repair equipment on their own. Finding local funding can also go a long way in the success of the project. Get funding from local governments, hospitals, companies, and other organizations. That integrates your project into the local community and supports your project's long-term success. Finally, measuring your success is key to the project. First, gather data before you begin your project to determine where you are starting from. Include clear, measurable outcomes in your project plan. Decide how you will collect data through your project and afterward. Maintaining a strong relationship with the community can help you collect data and also address any issues that data may bring to light. All of these practices are key to successful projects, and they are all required by the Rotary Foundation in the global grant process. In your application, you'll explain how your project will include each and every one of them. The document Terms and Conditions for Rotary Foundation District Grants and Global Grants is another excellent resource for more detailed information on all aspects of grants, especially if you're going to be working, like say in India or the Philippines. There are special rules for those countries. We have included, or we will include, a copy in your document packet.
In the grants management seminar and earlier, we mentioned Rotary's areas of focus and how we make an impact in each of the areas. Global grants support sustainable activities that are aligned with Rotary International's areas of focus and will produce results that address community needs. These 6 areas encompass some of the world's most critical humanitarian issues. They are promoting peace. We train adults and young leaders to prevent and mediate conflict and foster understanding within and across cultures. Fighting disease. We educate and equip communities to stop the spread of life-threatening diseases and improve and expand access to low-cost and free healthcare in developing areas. Supporting education. We strengthen the capacity of communities to support basic education and literacy, reduce gender disparity, and increase adult literacy. Providing clean water. We support local solutions to bring clean water, sanitation, and hygiene to more people every day. Saving mothers and children. We expand access to quality care so mothers and their children can live and grow stronger. And growing local economies. We carry out projects that enhance economic and community development and create opportunities for productive work for young and old. So, how do the 6 areas of focus come into play with global grants? Your project must be within an area of focus. Don't be an overachiever. Choose one of the areas of focus where you can have the most impact. This should be an outcome of your needs assessment. So when you do your needs assessment in the community and they tell you what the greatest need is, that should be the area of focus that you align with. The Rotary Foundation strives to process grants efficiently and ensures the quality of a grant project. Getting acquainted with the area of focus policy statements will help your project. Understanding your area of focus will help you get your grant approved. The policy statements, which we'll send to you, help you figure out if your grant activities are eligible. Ask yourself this: will the activity help achieve the goal of the grant? An example that we saw in our district of an activity we thought would fit nicely into several areas of focus was building eco stoves or indoor stovetop projects. By reading the area of focus policy statements, it was found that these are not eligible for global grants. So our advice is to always review what is eligible and ineligible for each area of focus before jumping into your project. Rotary International has provided us with guidelines for each area of focus. All global grant activities are required to align with one of these with the goals of an area of focus. And these guidelines state the specific goals for each area. The activities should have a direct impact in the area selected. And don't focus only on the outcomes. Concentrate on the main activities as well. Look for capacity building, training, and educational opportunities that will help make your grant sustainable. All grant requests must comply with the policy statement related to the intended area of focus. And more importantly, the Rotary International staff looks to see if your grant fits into one of these areas by using the policy statements. So becoming familiar with them is critical during all phases of your grant journey. As I mentioned, we'll include a copy of the area of focus policy statements in your document packet after your e-packet. So now, global grants aren't designed to be done alone, and partnerships are not only important, but required. After all, isn't one of our core values building goodwill and better friendships? To apply for a global grant, two or more Rotary clubs must work together. The host sponsor is the partner in or near the community that's implementing the project. The international sponsor, that's typically us on this end, works with the host sponsor but is located outside the host sponsor's country. The roles of the host sponsor: they're the ones that really initiate the project on the ground. They conduct the community needs assessment to make sure that we're identifying the greatest needs in the community. On the ground, they manage the project, both the implementation of it and the budget. And they receive the project funds so that they can distribute that money accordingly. The international sponsor, on the other end, provides financial assistance, technical support, and other guidance where needed. They also can provide remote assistance with some tasks that might be able to be done without being on the ground. And certainly providing service during site visits to make sure everything is going accordingly and to build on that relationship. Now, both sponsors must do a number of things too. Number one, they must be both qualified to participate in a global grant. They should work together to develop the project plan so everybody's on the same page. They should each have a project committee, and those committees should collaborate with each other. Again, making sure everybody's on the same page and going the same direction. And if there's partnering with cooperating organizations, that can be done by both sponsors as well. And certainly submitting project reports in the Grant Center is something that should be the responsibility of both sponsoring clubs. Going back to the cooperating organizations, if you work with a cooperating organization, both clubs and the organization must complete a cooperating organization memorandum of understanding. Although other organizations and volunteers may play a large role, the project sponsors are ultimately responsible for the outcome of the project, and that has to be clearly defined. Choose your partners wisely.
Very wisely. Now let's talk about all that goes into planning your global grant. This plan should be developed by both sponsoring clubs collaborating together. You would want to create a timeline of all the tasks that need to be completed. Work as a team. The host and international sponsors each have a project committee of at least 3 Rotary members. They all work together to make sure that we are meeting our goals and following the budget. Plan for continuity. You never know when somebody may get sick or something happens and they can't be on the committee. So plan for that continuity. Identify roles. Decide who will do what. Avoid conflicts of interest. Even the appearance of a conflict of interest can interfere with the success of a project. Get expert advice. Sometimes a qualified club member. Example, consult a civil engineer for a water project if they happen to be in your club. Cooperating organizations that have technical expertise and resources to help you with the project. A Rotarian Action Group or a RAG, R-A-G. And then there's a cadre of technical advisors. All of these people are here to help you. Identify measurable outcomes. When you measure your success, you can show that you made a difference, and we're all about making a difference. Because RI wants to measure the good we do in the world, they have built it into our global grant requirements. As you continue to plan your project, create a financial plan, develop a budget, and more importantly, raise the funds, because without the funds, you're not going to get the project done. An important tip would be to use the Global Grant Application template. The template will walk you through all the information you need to supply to RI. It gives you a chance to prepare your responses before entering into the online application. It alerts you to areas that you may need to flesh out a little bit more. Work on answering all the questions clearly and concisely. You don't get paid for using a lot of words. Now you're really on a roll. Once you plan your project and it's approved, it's time to implement the project. It's crucial that you implement your project according to your project plan. As you carry out your project, keep reviewing your project plan with your project committee and the team. Now that's not to say it wouldn't change, but at least everybody would know why it's changing and why we're deviating from the original plan. Communication, communication, communication. It's the key to having a smoother implementation of the project. Global grant sponsors for humanitarian projects and vocational training teams must incorporate monitoring and evaluation measures within the area of focus section on the online grant application. Now, monitoring can mean many things to other people. But to Rotary, it's the continual process of collecting specific data, and it uses the measures and benchmarks you outlined in your grant application to track the progress of your grant. Evaluation, on the other hand, is an assessment of how well your project is achieving those objectives. Now, there's a bunch of steps for monitoring and evaluating a plan. The first might be to establish clear project goals. Identify applicable project-specific measures. Add only measures that clearly link to specific goals. Establish baseline data and methods you'll use to collect that data. Submit the plan as part of your online application. Then you'd continue to collect the data during the project and monitor the progress. Evaluate data and submit results when you complete your report to the Rotary Foundation. Now, collecting data, this is where your cooperating organization or your host partner and the key community people can really lend a hand in collecting correct data. So be sure to utilize everybody on hand. Review the document Global Grant Monitoring and Evaluation Plan supplement that we'll be sending to you. The document has a list of measures for each area of focus. And you'll also find a glossary of Rotary's Foundation standard measures that explain exactly what each word in a measure means. So in other words, adult might mean to us someone over 21, but Rotary specifically says an adult is an individual over the age of 18. So check that glossary and make sure that you're using the correct terminology for the population or the area you're working in. Think of monitoring and evaluation as a circle. First, we monitor and evaluate. Then we resolve any issues that come about. Because we're lifetime learners, we learn from those issues, and we don't keep them under a barrel, we share them with others. So there we go, completing the full circle. Financial transparency is key to the project. The financial management plan you develop during the project planning helps you to keep track of grant funds. It promotes transparency to all involved and safeguards against the misuse. It also facilitates reporting. And remember where those funds come from. Rotarians, just like you and me, who donate to the Rotary Foundation. You would open a bank account that is used solely for receiving and dispersing those grant funds. Grants are not intended to produce income for the clubs, so keep the grant funds in a low interest or a non-interest bearing account. Some other things are very important that you do need to remember. Follow the local laws. Find out what's going on and what you can do and can't do under the local legislation. Transfer and disbursement of funds. Now, after your grant application is approved, your club must complete the payment requirements outlined in the approval notification before RI will transfer any of the funds to that very specific bank account. And of course, keeping financial records. Important, important, important. Retain documents, all correspondence including email. Beneficiary documentation, including community assessment and cooperating MOUs. Vendor documentation, quotes, and contracts. Grant-related documentation, including receipts, invoices, bank statements, inventory, and don't forget to take photos. You want to celebrate everything that you've done. And also all of these things that you're collecting and retaining, you're going to need to attach a lot of them in the reports that you file with the Rotary Foundation. Now we're on to reporting requirements. A project report is due within 12 months of receiving the first grant payment and every 12 months after that. Reports will ask for information on all aspects of the project as well as its outcomes. Rotary asks for grant reports to ensure good stewardship, but also so that we can show others how we change communities for the better. And unlike the district grants, reports are submitted to the Rotary Foundation, not to the district.
Beginning this year, or beginning in the 2020-2021 Rotary year, our district is instituting some new global grant approval and progress guidelines. Over the past several years, we were seeing a few things happening. First, grants weren't moving along very quickly, so our DDF was not being put to the best use. In a few cases, we had committed DDF to grants that not only took a long time, but ultimately fell through. So our DDF was reserved for no reason. Second, we haven't had any guidelines with regards to when clubs can apply for Global Grant DDF. So it's been first come, first serve. We didn't think this was fair to all concerned, as it was watching people rushing quicker and quicker. So the grants team came up with a set of guidelines to alleviate these issues that I'd like to share now. The goal of these guidelines is to establish clear timelines and expectations to ensure fair allocation and prompt use of Rotary Foundation funds. This is applicable to any grant for which District 5960 has been requested to contribute $2,500 or more. So if you're sponsoring a grant, certainly these are required. Also, If you're partnering with a club in another district and contributing more than $2,500, these guidelines apply. What wouldn't apply is if you are partnering with another club in our district, or you're partnering with a club in a different district but not contributing $2,500, contributing less than that. We are instituting a uniform deadline. All global grant proposal submissions are due by August 1st each year, and all proposals will be presented for review at the September grants meeting. This is very similar to the process we use for our district grants. It's just in September instead of June. So as you work on your global grant proposals, they need to be due by August 1st to the grants team. With the proposals due on August 1st, we also want to make sure that the proper amount of work has been put into the grants to ensure they're in good shape, both in scope and the intent of the club. Here is the information required for your proposal. You'll notice again that August 1st deadline. This is to give the grants team sufficient time to review the proposals and to work with you and the rest of the club contacts to make sure that the proposals are in good order for that September meeting. The information that we need lists of the host club and their contacts identified as well. Remember, the host club is the club on the ground in the country where you are going to be doing the grant. Are the host club and district qualified for grants through the Rotary Foundation? And our grants team can help you with that. You don't have to do that alone because you may not get a straight answer. You need to have a completed needs assessment. Remember, Margie talked earlier about the importance of a needs assessment, and we can tell you that one of the most surefire ways to get pushback on your grant from the Rotary Foundation is to not have an adequate needs assessment. We want to make sure that needs assessment is done up front to show that this grant is moving the right direction. The beneficiaries of the project have to be identified. That's the people in the community that are going to be positively impacted by the grant. Obviously, the area of focus must be identified. The explanation of the grant's sustainability. How will this grant move forward in ways that Margie talked about earlier? Margie talked about the importance of a training plan, and that needs to be submitted as part of this to make sure that everything is put together the right way in terms of how you will train the people on the ground to utilize the grant, whatever that is, the infrastructure afterwards. The preliminary budget. What does the budget for your project look like? Also, the preliminary financing page with the amount of DDF that you've requested. And along with that, a fund dispersal plan. How are you going to spend the money? What is the plan to do that? So along with establishing the uniform submission date, we also put together a progress reporting timeline to ensure that the grant is moving along. Without these guidelines, the process tends to slow down unnecessarily. So these guidelines should help create a little bit of a sense of urgency to get the project towards completion. The first deadline is December 1st for a progress report. Now, these progress reports they don't need to be hugely substantial. They just need to check some important boxes. Number one, your application should be fully entered into the Rotary Foundation grants portal in draft status. That means that a global grant ID number has been issued and at least 25% of the club funding is committed as well at that point in time. March 1st, 90 days later, is the next progress reporting deadline. The application should be in authorizations needed status in the grants portal, meaning you're waiting for authorizations from your club contacts, the district contacts, any other districts that might be chipping in funds, and the host club and district as well. Also, commitments for 100% of needed funding should be done by this point. So your grant is approved in September. By December, you should have the application entered in the grants portal. And by March, 90 days later, you should have your fundraising put together. By June 1st, then, you should have Rotary Foundation approval. What does that mean? That means that 100% of the funding is complete and you've answered all the questions successfully to the Rotary Foundation. You may think that these deadlines are strict, but we want clubs to be conscious of moving the grant forward as quickly as possible. You'll notice by June 1st, the grant needs to be approved by the Rotary Foundation. This doesn't mean the work has to be completed. It just means that you've had essentially 9 months to complete the application process and get the project approved. By working diligently, this should be able to be completed. So, what happens if you miss one of the milestones we shared on the next page, or on the previous page? If you miss one, failure to meet the June 1st milestone of having the grant approved by the Rotary Foundation can result in the revocation of the DDF, meaning that you have to start the project over next year. Again, we don't want our district designated funds just sitting when they could be put to good use with other projects. Failure to provide progress reports may result in revocation of the DDF if there's been no response from your club at all on the project getting going. Now, the grants team does have discretion to provide extensions. So certainly if there is a situation like a pandemic or where you are, I know in the past year, we've dealt with a couple of districts in other parts of the world that don't move real fast or anything like that. We'll give extensions if they are, if they're for a good reason. But again, we want to keep you moving forward here. As for ongoing reporting, they are due as required by the Rotary Foundation once the grant is approved. That means, well, okay, there's another couple things here. As we talked about earlier, that's 12 months. The first progress report to the Rotary Foundation is due 12 months after your initial funding, and then each 12 months after that. If you're delinquent on a report to the Rotary Foundation, your club will not be eligible to sponsor a new grant, either district or global. Note, though, because of the timing, this means that you're really 2 years behind on a report by that point. So it's not something that is, this isn't something that's going to happen in a quick scenario. Since all grant proposals will be reviewed at the same time, it will make it smoother to allocate the requested district designated funds to your proposals. This will be done by the grants team. During the grants management seminar, I mentioned an issue we've had over the past several years on the district grant side of things, that we've had more requests for grant funds than we've had available in DDF. So we've had a shortfall. Over the past few years, we've spent down our reserve of global DDF as well, and may face a similar situation for global grants. If there is a shortfall, we try to be as fair to all concerned as possible in allocating our DDF, and the grants team will use a matrix for this calculation. What goes into the matrix? It's several factors that are very similar to the factors on the district grant side of things. The positive being the per capita giving for the past 3 years, again, weighted more strongly towards the most recent year, so you can push your spot up the ladder on that one. Your club partnership and other global grants. So on the district side of things, it was district grants. This is partnering with other clubs on their global grants in the past 3 years. And again, we want new clubs to come forward. So we'll take a little bit of a negative view of how many global grants your club has sponsored in the last 3 years. And then certainly the grants team evaluation of the project and how many people it will benefit. So again, the more money your club gives to the Rotary Foundation and the more you partner with other clubs, the better off you'll be. So we've covered a lot of information in a short amount of time. In fact, I'm shocked that we're only 45 minutes into this on slide, whatever number we're on. But don't worry, you don't have to go through this process alone. There's plenty of tools and resources to assist you. As we've mentioned during this workshop and the grants management seminar, you'll be assigned a mentor when you first bring your idea forward. The mentor will work alongside you during this grant to help make sure your application is put together correctly and have the full grant process go smoothly. Second, our district international service chair can help research any special requirements, identify a club on the ground, so on and so forth. Our quick reference guide also provides a lot of good information, and I recommend you reviewing that. And it's the whole grants team working with you behind the scenes to make sure that the grant is put together as well as possible. Another key part of the global grant process is Rotary Foundation staff. Since the grant is managed by the Rotary Foundation, that means staff people will review the grant. Initially, they will potentially ask for additional info or to clarify certain things. Don't get discouraged by this. They're trying to help make sure your project fits within foundation guidelines and has the most impact possible. Along the way, you'll be able to ask them for guidance regarding the implementation and reporting of the grant as well. Let me stress, they want this grant to be successful, and their work helps to accomplish your goals. There are plenty of online resources at the district site and rotary.org as well. And as a reminder, we'll be emailing you several key documents after this workshop. Margie?
Probably more documents than you'd ever could imagine. All right, to recap, some of the principles of a successful grant. We talked quite extensively about the needs assessment. The most successful projects work with the community to identify a need. They figure out how to best address it and discover what resources are available within that community. So community involvement is absolutely an essential part of the needs assessment. Organized implementation plan. Use the results of your community assessment to start your plan. A good plan will make sure that tasks are completed on time and that none are forgotten. A good plan also clearly lists who is responsible for each and every task. Again, we talk about communication. Frequent partner communication and teamwork is important. Create a regular schedule to communicate current grant activity. That way you can get ahead of any issues that are happening and also celebrate little milestones that come along the way. You don't need to wait till the end to celebrate. Sustainable projects will have measurable and lasting outcomes for the community. Start early with sustainability. You can't end it, you can't add it at the end of the project. Proper stewardship. All project sponsors are ultimately responsible for the outcome of the project. Keeping good records is a key to proper stewardship. Grant results promoted within the club and the community. Like I said, don't forget to celebrate the milestones along the way. You've done a great job and great work to make the world a better place. Don't be afraid to toot your horn. And we talked about this too. Don't get discouraged. You are making a difference and changing lives. And sometimes that's a little more stressful than we'd like it to be, but think about the positive piece that we'll be creating with these global grants.
Thanks, Margie. Now we'll do our second attendance check. So if you could please enter your name and club in the chat box, that would be great. And Margie, while everybody's doing this, Ashok Patel had a question earlier about the minimum contribution from the host sponsoring club. Will you cover that for us while everybody's entering?
I certainly will. That's a very good question. In the past, the Rotary Foundation, required that your host club, say you're working in Kenya or Uganda, that they put in $100 US. Well, you know, $100 to us is not all that much money, but to some of those areas, $100 is a lot. So a few years, actually maybe a year or two ago, our Rotary said they do not have to put in any money. Now, if they can and want to and are, that's perfectly fine. But it is not a requirement that your host club put in $100 anymore. Does that answer your question?
Okay.
I'm assuming it
Sorry,
does.
sorry, it's Ashok. Yeah, it does. Thank you, Margie. And also, if you could just clarify or emphasize how we should partner or when we should partner and contact our Rotary Foundation reviewer at the head office, sometimes to clarify the global grants, besides working with our mentor here after the application's in progress. The reviewer gives us feedback, but when would be a good time to sort of minimize any a second or third revision?
Well, hopefully we're trying to work towards not having second or third or fourth revisions. But you know, in a perfect world, that'd be great. But I guess to answer your question, you know, first of all, when you're putting in your grant application and typing it into the online application, I would like to think that we, and as the district with the mentors and all of the experience that we've got within our district, that you already have a pretty darn good grant and there aren't going to be a lot of questions. That's our goal. So if there are, like we said, your contact at the Rotary Foundation, whoever's handling that area of the world, they will contact you, and sometimes they'll have a list that's, you know, a mile long. But our whole thought with having this global grant workshop is that we as a district help clubs get better prepared to, you know, meet the goofy questions that might come up. And we learned from experience. Many of our global grants in the past have had the same kinds of issues come up. Well, now we know that that's an issue and we ward it off right away. So I would say we'd like to have it prepared in better shape before you ever enter it in, Ashok. Does that make sense to you?
It does. Thank you so much. And I would definitely agree with the proposals that I've submitted before. You have been a wonderful district, and Judy O'Fallon here has been a great direct mentor. But certainly keep up the good work. This workshop was really amazing. And to cover all this in 1 hour is even more amazing. Thank you.
It's
Thanks,
called
Ashok.
information overload.
No, filter failure.
So to wrap up here before we open it up for more questions, you know,
Kyle,
we've
can I
talked.
make one more point?
Sure.
You know, we covered an awful lot of information, but really and truly, the documents that we'll be sending you, they're like priceless. They have so much information in there that you know, it'll give you a better sense when you read it that, oh yeah, this is a good idea, I'm going to do this, or you know, or I can't do that. It'll ward off a lot of issues to begin with. So utilize the documents that Rotary has prepared, because they really are great resources.
Thank
Absolutely.
you, Margie. Thank you,
Sorry.
Margie. This is Ashok again, and I just would echo that you are setting a global standard on how we should do this for community engagement and advancing the evidence-based practices that we really want to partner with.
Perfect. Thank you. And Margie, I think that was one of the key takeaways. We'll kind of, on the wrap up, obviously, you all know that the more that we give, the more that we can do. So please be champions of giving to the Rotary Foundation, as well as just doing the best grants possible and getting qualified. We talked about how to do that. Certainly attending both of these sessions, which I think all of you have done, and completing the memorandum of understanding is important. The other key takeaway that I would really emphasize is don't do the grant alone. Use the resources that Margie talked about with the documents, but also use our district grants team, the mentors, our district international service chair. Use those people, because even though you may have done a grant in the past, things change with regards to Rotary International guidelines and everything. And the mentors are able to keep up the speed as well as anybody. So they want to help you along. Rotary Foundation staff wants to help you along. And certainly don't try to tackle this all by yourself. but use the whole team that is there for you. Margie, any other takeaways from your end before we go to questions?
I just want to have a qualifier. Just because we gave this little workshop doesn't mean we know everything. But, you know, we can ask questions and get answers and you know, do our best to make sure that we are doing things appropriately. So, you know, don't think that we're the be all end all, because sometimes we don't know any more than you do.
Okay, with that, we're going to open it up for questions. I will say, just because we're dealing with incredibly sophisticated subject matter, don't be offended if we say, hey, let's take this question offline, just for the sake of the other 40-ish people that are on the call as well. Just to be fair to everybody, we want to, if it gets too in-depth or too specific to one grant, we may just have a follow-up conversation. Rick Olson, you said you have a question best done verbally. So why don't, you're unmuted, so go ahead.
Okay, you've ran through the reporting deadlines, you know, December 1, March 1, June 1, and it sounded like the Rotary Foundation doesn't really approve the grant until June 1. However, how does that mesh with the implementation? Let's say you're building a project, you're building a building. You have to wait until after June 1 before you can start construction. But it sounds like you have to 100% of your funds already committed by then. So how does the implementation and the reporting, how do those work together?
Margie, go ahead.
Yeah, okay. One super important thing, you cannot start your project until your project is approved by RI.
Okay, so
And
you can't really start until after June 1.
No, that's
well,
just
June 1 is just our date to say that we would like to have it approved by that date.
No, I'm talking. Okay, so let me run. So if we get the initial grant application in by August 1, we go through the December 1, the March 1, June 1, and then construction could start after that.
No, Rick,
No,
those are just reporting deadlines. So you could, if you got approved in September, you could have the grant approved by November. These are just the deadlines to make sure people are keeping up on the progress of things.
Oh, okay, I wasn't all clear. Okay.
Yep. Okay.
But it is very important for all of you listening that you cannot start your project until RI has approved it. And believe me, you'll know when they approve it, because I'll send you an email and there'll be get the champagne out.
I'd like to make one comment that I think pertains to all of us as we manage grants. When Margie or Kyle, I forget who had the transparency up, when they talked about you need at least 3 people in your club on that committee. That doesn't mean 3 bodies that you can identify and fill in. It means 3 people who are staying current with you and will know what it is the project is trying to do, who is trying to do it, how it is being done. Because what happens sometimes is that critical person, the person who filled out the report, the application, set it all in, got it approved, then suddenly finds a job in Timbuktu, and away he goes. And the 2 people in his club who were supposed to be working with him haven't got a clue what they're doing, and the grant goes into catastrophe mode. So make sure that you really have committed and participating members on your initiating club team.
Very good, Craig. And that's what we call that planning for continuity. You know, that if something happens to one person on the team, the other people can step up, and maybe, you know, just because we say 3, you can have 5, 6, 10 people that are super interested in the project and really want it to succeed, because, you know, isn't the end game that we really want to do good in the world? And this is an enormous opportunity for us to do that.
Mm-hmm. Margie, Sylvia asked a question. Can you have 4 from the club on the committee?
I think Margie just answered that.
Well, there's only room for 3 on the application, but certainly you can have 4, you know, people that are super interested in and great participants in helping put this grant together. But RI, the application, there's three people. And I don't know if we said very much about it, but there is this global grant application template. And if you cruise through that, you'll see all the questions that you need to answer. So it'll give you some sort of insight into, you know, as you're planning, how the heck am I going to answer that question, and what do I need to do to be able to do that? So that'll be one of the documents in the packet as well, that global grant template, application template.
And Margie, if I could just build on the first part of that answer, certainly if you have more than 3 people, obviously there's 3 official people that are part of the committee, but the more the merrier, because that just means that more people in your club are key pieces to the project, and you're going to have more people out selling it to your club members and the community at large. So the more people involved, the better it's going to be. Rick asked a question with the change of status of Rotaract clubs. Can a Rotaract club be a host sponsor? The answer is no. Not yet on district grants or global grants can a Rotaract club be a sponsoring club yet at this point. So that's still in discussion, but at this time, no, that is not possible. In fact, I confirmed that last week. Another question: can a local person from the host country fill out the community assessment page, as they can best identify the need? Margie?
Absolutely. One of the requirements, or when we first started out with this, is that RI would like the local community, the local or the host, you know, which would be the club on the ground, they would be the one that are driving that assessment. Now, obviously, an NGO that's you're working with, they are a great resource to help get those questions answered. But how can we here, if we really think about this, how can we here in Minnesota and Wisconsin say we know what's happening in Kenya or Uganda or, you know, any other, Nicaragua? We need people that are actually in the village, in the community. And that's why it's important to use all kinds of different people from the community. Don't just ask the leaders. It's, you know, if you're doing education, it would be the families, it would be the teachers, plus, you know, the people that are in charge of the country education. So you need to ask a lot of different folks, and the people on the ground, John, those are perfectly capable of doing that.
Margie, Rick Olson asked who to contact to find out which clubs in a host country are qualified. That can certainly be a question to you or I, and we can work with Craig as our current District International Service Chair, or Jim Hunt as our incoming DISC, to identify that. Right?
Correct.
Great.
I see Valdi's got the community needs assessment. That is one of the documents that will go out as well.
Yep, and it's a good point to send that. So we'll be sending, it's 9 or 10 different documents to you. One of them is a community needs assessment template. And Valdi's point in the chat box, to send that to the host Rotarians, it's available in different languages, but send that to them so they know what it should look like.
Absolutely, that's a great comment. And Rotary does have these in different languages. Like, I know I've seen them in Spanish, because I've received a couple of Spanish ones, and I don't speak Spanish, so that's a problem. So great question, Valdi. Thank you.
Jeff Harnley, you had a question about COVID-19 delay implementation. I'm not sure exactly what you mean by that. So if you can either unmute yourself and ask, or retype, and we'll ask in the meantime if anybody else has another question. Jeff, are you able to
Yeah,
share?
I'm just curious to know if once the project has been approved and the country that the project is dedicated to have this project, if COVID-19 is a problem there, would that be a situation for extension? I guess that would be the case, right?
Oh, absolutely.
And if the project's already been approved by Rotary International, certainly just progress reports to the foundation at that point would be needed every year afterwards. If it's in that lead up process where we've approved it as part of our whole plan for the year, and it pushes those progress guidelines out, yeah, I think it's something worth, it's certainly something we would look at to make sure it's taken into consideration.
Just to put a real world spin on that, about 5 years ago, we did have a grant, very well thought out, very well designed, very well documented, that was going into Sierra Leone, Africa, where they speak French, by the way. About halfway through the grant, half the funds had been expended and everything was rolling along. The Ebola crisis hit. And the entire club in the capital city of Sierra Leone that was working with us evaporated. They all went back to their villages to help take care of their families. There was no one to work with. The manager of the project said, whoopee, and he went out and spent money for motorcycles for himself and a few other things. It was a major problem. So yes, we can have disasters when there is a disaster that impacts the grant. That's why the more homework you do at the front end to make sure that you've got a good committee working, to make sure you got good people at the other end, will secure our hopes that we complete the grant rather than leave us dangling like we were in Sierra Leone.
And I'd like to say that with this crisis, this pandemic throughout the world, our global grants are going to be more important than ever to help eliminate and alleviate any kind of issues in these countries. I mean, our own country is going to have its own issues, but these global grants, don't be scared off by that. We really need to move ahead on helping the world be a better place.
Margie and Kyle, this is Ashok. Just 2 comments. One, we are sensing that urgency from our host sponsor that we're going to do a Shark Tank and then a global grant with in Uganda. And so they do want an expedited process on getting approval through RI. So we'll take the 2 steps in doing the district approval and then the global grant as time permits. I think that's a good lesson that you just mentioned about the Ebola crisis, and not to get scared off, but actually to get more focused and more mentoring on how to do this more efficiently. The other is we did get a global grant approved for Guatemala in October, and we installed the first 25 stoves by end of January, and we were planning to do an expedition in July, but because of COVID just have to delay some things. So one compromise was we just pushed out our deadline for completing the project to year 2, and maybe that's another way to look at the solution set. We will try to do more tele-education sessions with that host sponsor to keep the relationships and the other momentum going as we can.
That sounds like a great idea, is not to lose focus, because maybe what you really planned you can't do right now, but you can help them with the other areas. So good idea, Ashok.
Any other questions here that anybody has? And I am going to put up this other screen just so if anybody needs our email addresses, it's on there. But any other questions before we wrap things up for the evening?